Hi folks, I'm Vicky Chartrand, full professor at Bishop's University in Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada. So I contributed a chapter in the Routledge International Handbook on Decolonizing Justice entitled The Quotidian Violence of Indigenous Incarceration in the Canadian State, Why Reform is Not an Option for Decolonization. And my inspiration for this writing came from my work as the director of the Centre for Justice Exchange, or justiceexchange.ca, where we correspond with hundreds of people in prison on an annual basis. So in these exchanges, I communicate almost daily with Indigenous people in prison, and we learn tremendously from them on the state of carceral institutions throughout the land. So as many in the justice field already know, the rates at which we incarcerate Indigenous people in Canada, as elsewhere, like Australia, New Zealand, are comparatively much higher to non-Indigenous people. And what I find particularly disconcerting is that these numbers continue to rise despite the numerous research studies and correctional initiatives that have been instituted since the 1960s. So what I set out to do in this chapter is to look at all of the current research and to use the knowledge and information we've garnered through our work at the Centre for Justice Exchange to learn more about this trend. And what we found is shocking. So not only are the incarcerations of Indigenous people much higher, but they're also exposed to the most restrictive and punitive aspects of the system. So this can include, for example, higher security classifications to maximum, super maximum prisons, being more often segregated in solitary confinement, spending much longer periods of time in prison, less likely to receive discretionary release, more commonly subject to use of force interventions. And in speaking with Indigenous people inside, we've learned that they've also been taken from their families and forced into foster homes, adoption, and/or youth detention centers. So now these punitive interventions and ongoing segregations from community is consistent with a long series of carceral interventions in the lives of Indigenous people since colonization. Given the colonizing nature of the prison, I argue that prison reform has repeatedly failed and can no longer be an option. Rather, we need to prioritize community approaches and Indigenous sovereignty over justice matters. So this can include honoring land and treaty agreements, investing in community-based and justice-led initiatives, providing a basic livable income, investing in care, wellness, and healing. So to conclude, we need to divest from punitive responses and invest in those areas of life that support and build up Indigenous people and communities. Thanks for listening.